Welcome to this shared production between APA Publishing and the PsychSessions podcast. APA Publishing regularly features webinars that are free to psychology educators, researchers, and practitioners. You can find the full recordings for these webinars at apa.org. And now, a word from our sponsor, APA Publishing. APA Publishing wants to give you 15% off your order. If you teach classes like counseling, clinical psychopathology, or multicultural psychology, then this is for you. APA Publishing has books that are written by experts that are grounded in evidence and really help teachers. I'll give you a couple of examples. There's a book they have right now called Helping Skills. It's in its 6th edition, and it gives students clear, practical frameworks for understanding and learning counseling techniques. It's perfect for hands-on practice and skill development. Here's another one. Cultural Humility helps students build self-awareness and engage meaningfully across diverse identities and experiences. So head to apa.org because they want to give you 15% off your order today using code PS15. That's capital P, capital S, 15. Go check out APA Publishing. Well, thank you, Andrea, and thanks to APA for hosting this webinar. And I am looking forward to this. I've got to tell you, Ben and Wendy, my background is like this much in motivation. I think I had an intro psych course once that might have touched on it a bit. And so it's a topic that I have been a little scared of over my career. You know, as intro psych instructors, you are asked to do a lot in the course. I don't know if anybody else feels this, where you just feel like I'm not proficient at that. How am I going to speak to that? But what happened to me in the last, I would say 5 to 10 years is I started getting really interested in motivation for some reason, like something shifted in me. So the book is great, folks. It's a Motivation Mythbusters. It probably came out about a year ago, and you all did a big tour. You did a webinar like this. You did the About Psychology podcast. I'm sure you talked about it in other places, but I'm sorry, I'm calling you back because I just want to have a conversation about this, and particularly with an eye towards educators in the classroom, but I mean, in general. So welcome. Thanks for doing this. And Wendy, this is going to be casual. Just jump in, folks. If you have questions in the Q&A, we may get to them in the conversation. We might get to them afterwards. Just feel free to drop those in and we'll take them, as they feel right. But Wendy, I'm going to hopefully ask some other questions because you all have done such a great job of going over like the myths and what you want people to take away. It's written so well. This book is so accessible to people who are reading it at all levels. But my question to you, and Ben, you can jump in too, is why? Like, why did you write this book? Where does it sit in your career, the way you've been thinking about this? And we'll just go from there.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying all those nice things, and thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here and talk about the book. We can never stop talking about the book. So, well, it's interesting that, I've been doing research on motivation for a very long time, and it's interesting what you said about not having that background. Very few universities actually teach a course on motivation. There are, it's just when we have someone who happens to be in that area. But I'm always, when I say to my students, when they take the course, it's really psychology. It's why we do what we do. I mean, why wouldn't you have a course in that in your psychology major? So it's a really important course to have. And I just love to teach it. But, I can tell a little from your answer. I can tell a little bit about the story and can jump in too about how we came to think about this book. Actually, Frank and Ben and I were all members of the Coalition for Psychology in Schools and Education, which is a committee from the American Psychological Association. And we were actually sitting around lamenting the problems in motivation that students have that we are dealing with in the classroom. And we started to say, students believe this about themselves, or students seem to believe that about themselves, or students act this way. And we're like, those are myths. And we really didn't know each other very well. We didn't know each other just through the coalition. And we kind of sat around and said, we should put something out there that is accessible so that teachers and students can know, what kinds of things they're picking up that may be holding them back about motivating themselves and also motivating other people. And that's how the book got started. And just we went home. Usually you go home from these conferences and you're like, but we went home and we said, no, we're really going to do this.
That's great.
And we did. Yeah.
I love when products have these backstories of just like a coffee time conversation, inspired conversation. Ben, is that your recollection of this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things we all talked about is that we were all having conversations with people and realizing all the myths that were out there. And so, for example, the first chapter is about that some people are motivated and other aren't. We all connected around that myth because we had that conversation so many times that people held the myth that some people are motivated and others aren't. In fact, people would say, my kid just isn't motivated. I can't get them to pay attention at school. And, that represents this first myth. And so we started talking about all the conversations that we were having with people that represented each one of these myths in the book.
Yeah, I love that approach. I think it's inherently interesting, especially to students. And by the way, I don't know if you agree, but I would give this to students, this book. I'm holding up the book for those who can't see me, but I would give this book to students in a particular class and kind of design some curriculum around it. But it seems to be written for a broad audience. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's sort of, we did have in mind that that this could be used in a classroom, in a high school classroom or in a college classroom. Absolutely, because it's very research based. But we wanted to also make it a little bit fun and interesting, fun to read, so that that it would be fun for them, but also trying to make it accessible to a larger audience who is trying to, and it could be teachers, it could be parents, it could be coaches, anyone who is struggling and anyone who's struggling with motivation in themselves, which is everyone, and then people who are tasked with motivating other people or working with other people.
Yeah, and we here at OU, we've used it in two different courses. So we use it in a first year experience course. So this is all students at the University of Oklahoma have to take kind of a how to college course. And they read this book in that course because motivation is so important in the first year. And then we also use the book in a course for pre-service teachers. So it's a course called Motivation in Classroom Management. And we use the book kind of as our textbook to teach about motivation.
Okay. Well, I was going to go somewhere else, but that just seems like the place to go right now. So what of these myths, which ones do you see as most relevant to students at this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, I think they're all relevant.
Sure. Yeah.
The first one that I talked about, you're motivated and so is everyone else. This idea that some people are motivated and others aren't seems to be the most prevalent when we gave a survey on motivation myths. It was one of the most prevalent. So that's one there. But they're all prevalent. Wendy, do you want to jump in and?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going with you, Ben, on that one as the most basic one, because if you look at a student or your employee or your child, and you say this person's just not motivated, and you make this person attribution rather than thinking about what that we're all motivated, and what is it that's getting in the way? Those are two very different things. And we talk about in the book that there's the fundamental attribution error. When you're looking at someone else, you tend to make person attributions. You say it's something about them. When we're not motivated, we're like, oh, well, this is boring. Oh, well, this teacher is not doing, that is not doing a good job of motivating me. But when you're looking at someone else, but then the problem is when you make that attribution to the person, you begin to either give up on that person and say, well, there's not much I can do. That's a not motivated person. Or you sort of push and pressure from without. And that really has which is a natural response. We find, in all of our research, when someone's not motivated, you feel they're not motivated or they're not doing something, you push, and that tends to backfire because the more you push, the more people resist, and you get into this thing. So there's just a lot of consequences to believing that myth.
Right. If your tools to motivate somebody are to push them or to extrinsically incentivize them, I suspect both of those, from things I've read and from your book, both of those will kind of undermine your ultimate goal. Would you agree with that?
Well, that's right. And that's my second favorite, although they're all my favorite. But my second favorite is that rewards, we believe that rewards will increase motivation. And the truth is that when you reward people for doing things, you can get them to do it. But that's not motivation. That's persuasion or coercion. Because to motivate someone is to get into their own inner resources, to get into what propels them, which is needing to feel competent, needing to feel autonomous, needing to feel connected. And so if you push them from without, you're actually working against yourself because you're keeping them tied to that reward so that they're doing something because of the reward and they're not moving toward a value for the activity. And doing it because they want to, doing it because they see the value in it, that it becomes important to them, which is really what we're trying to do when we're teaching, is to help people value the information and take it in and all. So yeah, that there are better things that there are better motivators than rewards. Yeah.
Ben, you want to jump in on some of those motivators?
I do, yeah. So another one of the of my favorite ones that I think is really common amongst students, and Wendy already knows what I'm about to say, is that the myth that people know how good they are at things is a really common myth. People are notoriously bad for knowing how good they are at things, and so you can overestimate how good you are at things, and your self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to succeed, can be a little bit too high, or you can underestimate your self-efficacy, and so you can think you're not going to be successful. Both are issues, right? If you miscalibrate your self-efficacy, it can cause you to act in ways that can actually reduce your motivation in the future. The bigger problem in the classroom with students, I believe, is having low self-efficacy. Because at least if you have high self-efficacy, even if it's misplaced, you're going to try and still put forth effort. Whereas if you have low self-efficacy, you might not try. And that's when you have all kind of issues with learning and grades and whatnot. And so that is a really important one, to teach people how to calibrate their self-efficacy. And then if their self-efficacy is low, focus on how to increase their self-efficacy, including giving them mastery experiences, watching other people similar to them succeed, giving them those vicarious experiences, giving them feedback, aka social persuasion, and helping increase their positive emotions for what they're learning.
When we sit around as educators who really care about teaching and who really care about students, we sometimes, this conversation comes up every once in a while, where we can't fathom the type of teacher who may be, and it could be because of burnout or other environmental reasons, but who would just cross their arms and say, do it. Like, read the syllabus. If you're not reading the syllabus, I'm not going to help you out. If you're not motivated to do the class in the way that I have outlined it, there's a problem with you. I think you disagree with that fundamentally. Can you speak at all to context? and your classroom and setting up a course for motivation?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, we all, I mean, we all struggle with those experiences, and it's not to be critical of people who say, I've done everything. Here's a syllabus, and if you don't read it, it's your problem. But yeah, that isn't, ultimately not going to be productive. But so yeah, just if one of the ways we think about motivation, or I think about motivation, is that people are motivated. They're motivated to be competent. They're motivated to be to be choiceful about what they do. They're motivated to be connected. So all the things that you can do to facilitate those experiences. So we want to give a lot of structure, for example, because students don't feel competent. When they come into the classroom, they're like, I don't understand the rules of this game, particularly when they're first year students. And so really being, and they might not know how they're supposed to read the syllabus or something. So thinking about how can we start them feeling competent about taking this course in the first place? And then helping them to feel autonomous, to feel like what they're learning is relevant, that they want to be there, that there isn't all this pressure on what pressure feelings of pressure. We were talking before we started actually about our own dreams about messing up in the classroom and not having our syllabus, and that's because we experience pressure. When the students experience pressure from grades, pressure from that they're not going to that they have to do things on a deadline, and all those things undermine their sense of wanting to be there and getting behind what they do. So we can do things like giving choices about what people do so that they feel more behind what they're doing. And then also being connecting with them. I think we saw this so much during COVID, where it was just so important to try to make these connections, to be empathic about where your students are and how they might be feeling, and how new this is, or how stressful this is, or how whatever they're feeling, finding out what they're feeling and making those connections so that they are comfortable asking for help, and they're they're feeling like you're open to hearing what they need.
Yeah. And to expand on that, I always try to integrate personal relevance and value into the course. And so, and Wendy said a little bit on this, but to expand on it a little bit, number one, personal relevance is allowing students to bring in their own examples of experiences that they're having with the content from their everyday life into the classroom, whether that's a weekly reflection assignment where they're talking about where they might have noticed the ideas in their everyday life, or whether it's a classroom discussion where they can share this with each other. Really making those out of school connections facilitates that personal relevance and helps to develop interest. But in addition to that, thinking about different types of value. So thinking about attainment value, which is your value, the value of the content for how it relates to your identity, can be really, really helpful to build a connection to the course content. Or utility value. How is this useful to you? How will it help you in other classes? How will it help you achieve things outside of the classroom? And then thinking really carefully about the cost of your classroom. What does it cost your students to engage in your class? What does it take them away from? It takes them away from social situations, takes them away from their other classes. Potentially it takes them away from, spending time with their family. So there's an effort cost there. What can you do to increase the value and decrease the cost and integrate those ideas into the classroom from the start?
Yeah, I think when I read the book, it's so much about designing environments. And that's why, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why when I feel like a bit powerless as an educator to change something in a single student's life, or maybe like I think when we're young and nobody taught us how to teach, maybe we are more likely to teach a one size fits all course. And then as we sort of develop and get better methods, we start to play a little bit with how can I meet different needs of different students. And that is never ending for me. I'm always changing the context and the environment. What do you think about a one size fits all class versus some of these things that you're talking about, which seems a little more dynamic and seems to be a design solution rather than a, give you more points solution, give you extra credit solution, push you along solution?
Yeah, I can start this one. So I think you're exactly right on that. I mean, a one size fits all is probably not going to work for everyone. The thing I tell people that I love about teaching the most is that no matter how good you are at teaching, you're never as good as you can be, because your context is always changing. Your students are always changing and developing, and that's a good thing. That's why it's always a challenge, and it's why we all love teaching. So, some of the things that I like to do are at the beginning of my class, I ask students to tell me about their interests, their goals, their hobbies, and then I try to integrate those things as examples throughout the course, or integrate them into activities and assignments, or integrate those interests and hobbies into my lecture. And then that way I'm being responsive to students' needs, interests, and goals, and then kind of drawing them into the class.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. Wendy, do you have anything to add about context or environment?
Yeah, no, I think that I'm going to stress the empathy issue again, just of finding out where your students are empathizing with the fact that they may feel that they're going to be graded, and we know grades, when people focus a lot on grades, they're focusing on narrowing their attention and maybe missing the forest for the trees because pressure makes you narrow in. So sort of empathizing with, yes, we have grades in this class. I know we do. And I know that's pressure. And here's what we can do together to feel less like this is not about that for us. And this is how we're going to proceed. And we're not going to stress the grades. And here's how to be successful. And sort of really empathizing with where they are, what they might feel, hearing how they might feel, about not being afraid to hear all that, so that you feel like you're in this together to create an environment where they can be successful and they can learn, and they can not be focused on the outcomes, the performance, as much as the learning. And that's really hard to do. It's something you do together with your students, in setting that tone.
I'm starting to hear kind of the themes come up from the book in just the way that you're talking about it. And we're talking about giving students mastery experiences because maybe that can ignite something in them, or making sure that they feel connected. And when you talk about relatedness and empathy, is it connecting them? Like, I think that old, and maybe it's defined different ways, but that whole student engagement thing is students connected to each other, students connected to the instructor, students connected to the content. Where are you thinking what is the most important, or what are important considerations when it comes to engagement for you, or empathy?
I mean, I think all those connections are important. With you as a professor, knowing that you're available, connecting students and making it, giving the feeling that we're not competing against each other. We can all be successful here, and here are ways we're going to work together. And connecting to the content. So I think all of those are important. I was going to pick up also on something that Ben said about we were talking about feeling competent and all, and and empathy, and realizing that, particularly with first year students, they may be coming in, they may have been very successful in their small high school or something. But when they come into the college classroom, they start comparing themselves to the people around them. We call that phenomenon the big fish, little pond phenomenon. Because how you feel is very much a function of how you think the other people are doing. And so when they see that they're not now no longer the top in the class, they start to feel really incompetent. But again, you kind of, if you're tuned into those sorts of things, you can talk about that and realize that, the first exam is not indicative of how you're going to do. And, like keeping those things out, really, really, really out there. And, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other piece that I am picking up on as we've been talking is like students need to feel some sort of agency, like they have a choice. And I know like good teaching offers lots of choices to students. That literature has been around for a while, but where do you all see that in terms of motivation to give students choice? And what do you call it? You want to take this one, Ben?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's really important. And the idea is structured choice, right? So we have content that we want to teach, and we have objectives that we want the students to learn. And so the idea is structured choice. I do this assignment in my class where I break students into 3 groups, and one of them, I force them to do 2 activities. And the second group, I give them a choice. You can choose among these 8 activities. Choose the 2 that are most interesting to you. And then the third one, I say, do any activity you want. No guidelines, no rubrics. Create as you will. Well, it turns out the people who are the most motivated are the people in the middle. This is called structured choice. So they have an opportunity to choose among some interesting activities. When you force people, the too much structure, they have less motivation because they feel like they're being pushed. And then the complete freedom group, there's a big misconception that you think they'd be the most motivated, but they're not. They have too much choice, right? They don't have guidelines and expectations. And so the students get to have an experience with structured choice. And that's the ideal in the classroom. If we can set up our classroom to allow some choice, but knowing that we have objectives, that's when you're going to have the most motivated students.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in some, there's been some confusion in the literature and out there just about that you can't have structure and autonomy. They're at odds in some way, and they're totally not at odds. You can have structure in the classroom, guidelines, expectations, and you need to, but you can convey that structure in a way that feels choiceful to the students. They can have some say in that, in what they do. They can have some choice. They can see the value, the meaning for why you put it together that way. And so you can have both structure and support autonomy in your students at the same time. They're totally not at odds.
Yeah. That's really helpful to hear. And again, I think the takeaway message is if you want your students to be able to do something, you change the way that you design. Unfortunately, that's not an easy thing for educators because we need time to think through and strategize, but we have more and more students coming to us, another class getting added. We've got service and whatever promotion that we're going for. And so it's just everything piles up. But to take that time to design in a way that gets at these things, I think is so incredibly important. And sometimes for me, it took decades to figure out that there was a problem and then have the time to start building these things in. I have a question, and folks, just so you know, I'm looking at the Q&A if you have questions, but I'm looking at a relevant, and you all don't have, Wendy and Ben, you don't have to look at this. I'll monitor it. But I'm looking at a question that came up a little bit ago, and your book is about motivating to understand like what the evidence says, what psychological science says about motivating yourself and others. I want to talk about others for a little bit, and then I want to get to this mystery of myself. Because I think we've all found ourselves like needing to do something big, meaningful, important, and can't get it started. And this happens like all the time. But let's go with others. So this person said that they really appreciated, Ben, you talking about self-efficacy as it's related to motivation, and asked if you can maybe speak to this situation, both of you, either of you. Their son seems to have high self-efficacy and doesn't do much high school work. He can do really very little and still succeed. He regularly gets to be in danger of failing and then pulls out A's and B's in the end. How does that fit with the general pattern of a relationship between motivation and self-efficacy? Or maybe just, we have all met a kid like this, right? Who's not really doing the hard things and is getting by. Is that going to hurt them? Or what do we think? Easy question for you, you know?
Yeah. I mean, do you want to take it first, Wendy?
Oh, either way.
Yeah. I mean, I think they are trying. So there's some good in there. They seem to be doing the things at the last minute, albeit they're doing it to be successful. So the effort is there. So my focus here would be on what are some strategies that we can teach this individual to do things to where they can learn in a little greater depth. And so focusing on self-regulation strategies. When is the best time to do something? Focusing on having time management strategies, focusing on organizing your environment to be more beneficial for you and your motivation. So my focus here would be on like, hey, you've got the goal to succeed. Now let's get the goal to actually learn deeply. And how can we do that?
Yeah. And relevant to this, Wendy, as you kind of address this, I do think about your big fish. Nope, small fish, big pond, whatever, what the phenomenon was. But yeah, I see that in this kid's future where and I actually see it in my own story, which is as a first generation college student, I never got what I needed. I never got to practice the skills, the mastery skills that you all are talking about before I got there. So Wendy, can you just speak to this situation?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. And so for this student, things are not that challenging, and he can kind of get by, and he might believe if he's not putting in that much effort, like, I don't have to try that hard. It's because I'm smart. I'm good at this stuff. And if we make that attribution, you can, as long as everything's fine, you kind of get by, and that's great. The problem becomes when things get really tough and you begin to not do well. And then if you thought you did well because you didn't have to try and because you're smart, then all of a sudden you say, oh my God, I'm not smart. I'm actually not smart. And then you stop trying and you sort of say, okay, I'm just going to put in the least amounts of effort so that I don't fit, and just to be able to say, I didn't even try. So it is a little bit dangerous to make that attribution, that, and that does happen. And we do see that at the college level sometimes when kids come in and all of a sudden they're not doing that well and relative to their peers, and they really get demotivated. So yeah, the question is how can you help this person to value effort more? That's a challenging thing when things aren't that challenging, but maybe trying to work with the school to get more challenging material or talking to them about with some effort. I know you can get by, but with some effort, and what's holding them back from trying more. And sort of getting into that, what those attributions are for why they're doing well, and what their own goals are for the future. What are their goals in terms of succeeding and things like that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think another thing that could help with this kid is helping make the content personally relevant and interesting. Because I was very similar to this kid in college. I was just getting by in my classes to get the grades so I could get a degree. And then I took a psychology class and absolutely fell in love with it. I fell in love with it. I thought the content was so awesome because it was so personally relevant. And when that happened, I wanted to learn the content at such a deep level. So when you have that really deep desire to learn something, you're going to use more strategies to try to learn it. So focusing in on personal relevance, a big one for me.
Yeah. And as a parent of a 13-year-old who is almost dealing with this exact thing right now, and with my counseling psych hat on, I'm just telling myself, it's likely going to be okay. They're likely going to run into that psychology class that they just love. And so calm myself, let her be her. So that's always good to remember as well. But what a skill for parents to have education in this kind of motivation psychology, to be able to implement this for not only their students, but kiddos as well. All right. So I have this other question. I saw it come up earlier, but thanks, Rob, for putting it into the Q&A. And Rob McIntyre, who is a friend, actually, he said that one of the chapters in Instructional Illusions, a book by Hendrick et al., is about motivation. And they claim that success breeds motivation, not the other way around. And he's wondering if you agree with that.
Well, this isn't exactly the same thing, but we have a chapter called, you should wait for motivation to strike, just wait for the right time. And the problem is that motivation may never strike. So what you want to do is basically do something. If you're trying to get something done, just do anything, do just a small thing. And that will give you feedback back that you're, positive feedback back from doing that. And that can breed motivation. So, and that's a similar sort of thing that, yes, motivation can breed action, but action can breed motivation as well. And so, yes, I think that is a similar sort of thing. So instead of waiting for motivation to strike, and you set some goals, very specific goals. You set some timelines and all of that, and then you do something because that's so structured, and then you get the feedback back, and then it breeds motivation. So I think that's very much in keeping with what your friend is saying.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I have a lot of my former students who are now teachers in the field, and they'll get a hold of me and say, Heddy, I need help motivating one of my students. And almost always one of the issues is self-efficacy. And so when I am trying to address self-efficacy or help the teachers address self-efficacy, the first thing you can do is give them a mastery experience. And so basically give them a win, because when they have a win in your classroom, you can build on that. So you can slowly ramp the challenge and help them stack more and more wins until they're caught up with the material and caught up with the rest of the students. And so, yeah, I do agree with that statement that success breeds motivation. And you can see that in the self-efficacy literature.
I want to honor this comment that came through, because at a community college, I see this as well. And I think we see it at community colleges. I think we see it in lots of institutions of higher education, where even outside of our classroom, the broad context of the institution or of the realities that students are facing. Somebody from Salinas, California was just mentioning that it's not only what's happening in the classroom, this is what I'm interpreting them to say, but that motivates people. Sometimes, they are struggling. And how do you think about sort of like life circumstances that keep people from motivation, or do you agree with that? Whoever wants to take that one.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and it's chapter 10 in our book is focused entirely on structural inequities, and so people do have unique circumstances that are influencing their performance and their motivation in certain ways. And so I think as teachers, being cognizant of those structural inequities, exploring what are the issues that our students are facing, being open and willing to talk to them if they want to talk about some of these things, being flexible in our deadlines, and allowing for a missed assignment to be resubmitted and to be revised and resubmitted. And so just being open to that and aware of that, I think can help students a lot to overcome that and work through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do values fit in? I did see somebody in a comment just talk about like, how does understanding what a person values, and I think this comes from organization psych, values clarification. Did that cross your work at all about values and motivation? Like, should we just be pouring ourselves into the things that, is it about self-reflection and knowing what we value, what's interesting to us? And maybe this actually flips us back to motivating ourselves. What are the factors that are helpful in getting ourselves to do the things that we would, I don't know if like to be doing would be the accurate word, but the things that we need to be doing? Wendy?
Yeah. There's some great literature on New Year's Eve's resolutions. Like we all want to do certain things. Like what are the percentage of people who actually meet their New Year's Eve resolutions? Like 20%, something very small. And so we're sort of like we say we're motivated. We really want to do that, but we also have to have a lot of tools to be able to make these things happen. So like we say in our book, motivation is not enough. Not wanting to do something, you've got other problems. But we even want to do these things, and we can't get ourselves to do these things. So we have a lot of strategies in the book that can help people. For example, you use these implementation intentions that they're called. These if-then statements to set it like when that's going to happen and under what circumstances. So you want to ask your boss for a raise, and then you put an implementation intention in there, which is when I see my boss in the break room, I am going to ask him to have a meeting, the first time I see them. So you don't just say, well, this isn't a good time, or if I go to the grocery store, I'm going to only shop in the outside aisles and I'm not going to shop in the inside aisles. And if I feel like shopping the inside aisles, I'm going to remind myself that, so you give yourself these kinds of very specific self-instructions so that you have the time and the place and the circumstances which you get yourself going. So there are kind of strategies that you can use, because even if we're really motivated, really want something, things get in the way and we get distracted, and we can even plan for, if I get up in the morning and I get up in the morning, I'm going to go to the gym at 8:00. And if something happens, then I'm going to go to the gym on Tuesday at 8. So you put into play what can happen when you aren't able to fulfill that goal. But so planning, goal setting these implementation intentions, there's lots of strategies that we can use with ourselves that are really going to help us be successful in turning motivation into action, which is not so easy all the time.
Yeah. And in addition to that, and one of the points of the book is understanding motivation correctly, understanding the science of motivation and being able to recognize it in yourself is really, really important. So on page 290 of the book, we have a motivation flow chart, which gives you all of these questions to ask yourself. And based on the answer, it'll lead to a next question. It's a decision tree. And if you follow that decision tree, it'll end with some boxes that give you advice on how you can motivate yourself or others. And so that's a huge thing, is understanding motivation, how it works, and what questions to ask yourself to keep yourself motivated.
By the way, I love that chart, and I love thinking about bringing that into the classroom and helping my students use it as a tool.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that idea. Yeah, I love that idea. Yeah, for example, if you're feeling not motivated, then you ask yourself, well, do I not feel competent to do this, or do I feel like I have to do this, or do I feel like nobody cares if I do this? If you are motivated, you're like, how do I get started? So different. Yeah. But I love that idea of giving that chart out in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes we forget that motivation is pretty nuanced, right? And there's a lot of triggers that can get us going. And if we don't know ourselves very well, and especially in those minutes or those moments where it's like time to open up your computer and start writing or whatever, and you just do not feel like it, sometimes you don't know how you're feeling. So it's great to have an external tool like that. Ben, did you have something that you were going to share?
No.
Okay, good. Then I'm going to keep going here. All right. So here's a comment from somebody, and I think this is just the reality. And I'm here to help kind of facilitate this conversation. And so I have somebody in the chat who has suggested that, when you're at an institution of higher education that is, I don't know, like a research institution, R1, whatever, and there is a certain bar and expectation of student readiness to be in the classroom, that really you should be able to call students to do what you want them to do. And it's really on the students. And I hope I'm not oversimplifying what they have suggested here, but let's just take that as characterize an instructor who believes that. And in order to get where they want to go, where they want their students to go, they're really going to need to have their structure, their learning outcomes. What would you say to somebody who is who kind of approaches teaching this way?
I'm not sure I exactly got it. So
yeah, I'll clarify it real quick.
Okay.
Because I think we all have our outcomes and structures. But where are we watering down? If we are creating context and designing courses for students that really cater to their motivation, their individual motivation, are we watering down our teaching, and does it actually undermine maybe what our ultimate outcomes are?
Yeah, it's a really good question. In my motivation course, the number one comment that I get is, I really wish I would have learned this somewhere. I had no idea about any of this motivation. Why isn't this required reading in K through 12 so that we can practice our motivational strategies? And by the time we get to college, we know how to motivate ourselves. But students don't necessarily have those skills when they get to college. So it is important to practice them. Now, like you said, especially in a big lecture hall, you just can't design a course that's personally relevant to 300 students. It doesn't work that way. But you can do things to provide some choice and autonomy. You can do some things to help build relationships between you and the students and between the students. You can design your course in such a way that it supports competence. And so just general course design, you can do a lot of these things that we're purporting to do in this book without necessarily having to individualize instruction for every single kid in your class, or student in your class, which is impossible.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think sometimes this gets at what we were talking about before. I think sometimes we equate some of these strategies that we're using to low expectations, but we are definitely not arguing for low expectations. I think in general, in the classroom, and particularly with students from diverse backgrounds, we want to have high expectations. We want everybody to succeed. We want everybody be their best. And so having high expectations and doing these other strategies are not at odds. And so it's not watering down to take into account, I don't think, to take into account how you can meet people's needs for autonomy, for competence, and for relatedness in your teaching. And also, and part of supporting competence is to have these high expectations.
Somebody asked in that chat earlier, and just for clarification, competence by your definition is that's when we're talking about mastery, we're talking about competence, right? So giving students mastery experiences where they're having success at something. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And feeling competent, feeling like I am coming into this class. I know how to succeed. I know how to avoid failure from what my professor told me. I know what to do when I am struggling. And so I feel like I don't feel helpless when I come in here. I feel competent to proceed because I have the information I need to be successful. And that's a hard thing to do. And as Ben said, not everybody is going to feel that way all the time, but setting that up and also setting up the feeling that struggling and mistakes are part of this process. They mean you're trying and they mean you're in it, and that's great. And so I want to, if that comes up and setting this, we call it a mastery classroom versus a performance classroom where everything's, grades. And so setting that up from the beginning can also help.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to give you both a final word because we are coming up to our time. But I just want to let people know that the thing that I really appreciated about this book is there are a lot of books out there on something related to motivation or life hacking or whatever. This is a really nice evidence-based book about what we know about the psychology of motivation, grounded in psychological science. And I was so as soon as I opened the front cover, good job, your peers, Adam Grant, Daniel Pink, Carol Dweck, all endorsing this book. I know that you have given a great gift to us to be able to use something like this in summarizing the science in such a way. So kind of last words, Ben, what do you want to talk about? I think you mentioned something about kind of how you do this in the classroom.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple words about how you could use this book in the classroom to teach about motivation. So there are opportunities in every chapter for students to write their own examples. So at the end of the chapter, it says, write a little bit about how you would motivate yourself or others. There are case studies in the final chapter that students can work that they can work together on to solve, or work with the teacher on to solve. And then I highly recommend assessing misconceptions. So I created an assessment around this book that I give to my students, and I see what are their misconceptions. And then I can design my course around conceptual change around the really common misconceptions that the whole class seemed to hold. And then finally, I recommend facilitating experiences with the ideas in the book, giving students an experience with their self-efficacy or lack thereof, or inability to assess their own self-efficacy. And I've been working on creating experiential assignments for each chapter in the book.
That's great. We'll look forward to maybe seeing those at some point. I don't know if you want to share those broadly, but hopefully the APA can help with that as well. And that's fantastic. Wendy, any kind of final thoughts, or it's a year later, you worked really hard on this book, you put it out to great reception. And what do you think about it now?
It's funny. I think Frank, Ben and I talked about it, said we were writing the book. All of these things come up in terms of your own motivation in writing a book like this, right? We were like, how do I wake up in the morning, I'm supposed to be writing it, and I just can't get myself to do it, using these strategies. So it's been really, writing a book like this is a learning experience too. We had to, some of it we do research on in particular, but some of it was just looking at the literature and finding out all these new things. So it was a really nice experience in being able to learn a lot about myself and about working with other people, working with students. So yeah, really, really fun.
Yeah. And we're the three authors on this book are from three different areas of psychology. So we have a clinical psychologist. I'm an educational psychologist. Frank Worrel is a school psychologist. And so learning from each other while writing this book and perspectives in this different areas of psychology was really enlightening.
Yeah, incredible. I had the opportunity to hang out with Frank a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this session. And he's sorry he couldn't be here, but this is you guys have done a great work with this, and I'm hopeful that people will get this into their hands and maybe even use it with their students. So I want to thank you both for being here today. Thanks for everybody for watching and listening. And I think we are going to turn it over to Andrea at this point for any housekeeping items.